Democracy is the government of the people, by the people, for the people. Good evening and welcome. This is Face the Nation. We've invited three guests to our studios this evening as well to discuss on the topic elections or no elections, future of democracy in Sri Lanka. Joining us this evening on the show are Dr. Nala Gudeheva, Member of Parliament representing the Freedom People's Alliance. Also joining us this evening on the show is Rohan Hettiarachchi, Executive Director of PAFRO, as well as Iran Wickramaratne, Member of Parliament representing the Samika Jana Balawegaya, to pose questions from our panelists this evening. On to my immediate right is Shania Darigama, on to my immediate left is Attorney at Law Sharon Benedict, and on to my far left is Mariam, joining us this evening on Face the Nation. I'm not going to tell your surname, Mariam, unfortunately today, but I'll try my best to do so at least by the end of the show. So let's start off tonight's show with Dr. Nala Gudeheva, Member of Parliament representing the Freedom People's Alliance. What are your thoughts on the current political climate in Sri Lanka?
Thank you, Shamit. Before we come to the current situation, I think we must go back at least 1 year, or rather more than that. See, let me start with 2019. 2019, 6.9 million people of this country voted for a president, which was followed by the parliamentary election, more or less the same number of votes. The party came to power with almost two-thirds majority. So at that time, there was so much expectation from those people who voted for the new president of the party. I also belong to the same party, and I canvassed heavily for the president. We had expectation that there will be a big difference in the way the country will be run and the country will prosper. Of course, when 2019, when the president contested, the country was already struggling economically. And we thought we can solve all those problems, we can bring prosperity to the people. But unfortunately, all of us know it didn't happen. During the first 2 years of the president's tenure, a lot of things started going wrong. A lot of decisions were challenged not only by the public, but also people within the party. The president and his team, close team, did not adhere to what was promised in the manifesto. To cut a long story short, by the end of 2 years, there was a lot of dissent, even within his own team, by the end of 2 years. Inside the parliament, people started declaring that they are going to be independent and leaving the party. One by one, different MPs started leaving the party, and government almost lost its majority at one point. And then at the same time, the country started running into a lot of financial difficulties, as we all experienced. It came to a situation where there was no gas, no electricity, so much problems, and particularly the middle class got severely affected. People came to the roads, and there was this Aragalaya, which finally resulted in the entire cabinet being replaced first, then the Prime Minister going, and then finally even the President leaving on the 9th of July 2022. So then I thought, as a member of the ruling party at that time, at least now we must give a shot. We must try a different leadership within the party and go back to what we promised and what was not delivered. But that didn't happen because the ruling party, which I also represented, took a very unusual decision to support a person who had come to the parliament from the national list, and already Gotabaya Rajapaksa, the president, had made him prime minister. The majority of the party decided to vote him as the president when the president had to be elected from the parliament, which was a complete distortion of the people's mandate, because 6.9 million people who had voted for Gotabaya Rajapaksa and then for SLPP had outright rejected Ranil Wickramaratne. I mean, he was their arch enemy. And not only 6.9 million voters, in fact, it is much more than that. It is 11.1 million, because all those people who voted for Sajaba, JVP and other people also have to be counted. Ranil Wickramaratne's party, UMP, had obtained only 2.1% of the votes at the last general election. So 98% of the people had rejected him. Here, SLPP brings this person as the president. So it's a completely distorted situation where the parliament electing a person rejected by 98% of the public. So in a democratic country, this is not acceptable. In fact, myself and 13 other MPs voted against him at that, and the following day, the first day Parliament was held, we also declared independence and we left the government. So we have come to a situation where we need to go back and now check what do people really want, because people's mandate has to be tested. Because if you want the democracy to continue, it must be people's will. So we need to find out what do people want. The best opportunity has come with this local government election, which is due on time. It has already been postponed by 1 year. Now it has to be held in March. So this is the first opportunity and the best opportunity to test what people want. And now we are getting ready for the election. Election Commission has called for the election. Date has been fixed. But the government, the ruling government under the current president, whom I believe has been rejected by 98% of the people then and still rejected, doesn't want that election to be held. So he's doing everything possible within his power to prevent that. So many instances he has tried that. The latest one is the government printer refusing to print the ballot papers. So here's the situation we are in, a situation which we all must oppose and fight against.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nala Gudeheva, Member of Parliament of the Freedom People's Alliance. Dr. Gudeheva, in your opening remarks, you said that certain members of the government at one point wanted to leave the government. Which period was this?
This was just before the president appointed his second cabinet. This is somewhere around February, March period.
So this was all after the milk was spilled and everything was rejected
when
and all that.
When the crisis started, different groups started saying.
But 2021 there was no intention.
This is 2022.
Right. Okay.
2022.
Just want to get
it all happened during about 4 months period.
4 months period. Thank you very much. I now move my attention to Iran Wickramaratne, Member of Parliament representing the Samik Janabala Vegya. What are your thoughts, Iran, on tonight's topic? Sri Lanka needs elections or no elections?
Thank you for inviting me to be a part of the discussion. Sri Lanka needs democracy. Elections are only one very important aspect of democracy. And I often feel that, the concept of democracy is not embedded in. I went to a government school, then I graduated from there, then I joined the All Boys Union of that school. And one day I went for one of these AGMs where they elect the president, the vice president, secretary and all that. And then suddenly the person sitting in the chair is nominating the people who should be elected. And somebody got up from the crowd suddenly and he put somebody else forward. There was absolute silence. And then I was wondering what's really happening. And then I realized that, elections are really fixed. Even in the OBAs and the OGAs, that means those of us who are in office, often are trying to put people who we know, who we are comfortable with. And then when suddenly from the general audience or the general membership a name comes up, everybody is like, and they looked at the person like, what has he done? He's done something wrong. And then I realized that day that, democracy is not really embedded, and we are not really promoting democracy as an ethos, even from a young age, and I'll give you an example of school and an OGA. So, this is what we experience everywhere. Ranil Wickremesinghe doing this is no surprise at all. And the United National Party has had one leader for the last 29 years. And that's part of the reason that some of us actually came off. One of the main reasons was because of the lack of internal democracy within the party. And we were saying, there should be an election, and then whoever comes forward, and let them decide who should be the leader of the party. That's how SJB, Samagi Janabala Vegya, was formed. That was the main reason. So this democracy principle, the value of democracy, is not embedded. So now I'm not surprised at what's actually going on with an election, you see. Elections can't be decided by those of us who are voted in. The public vote us, the public are sovereign, and the public vote us out. We are there for a particular period. And when we are voted in, there's a set of rules. And we are voted in based on the set of rules. I go to play a cricket match. There's a set of rules before I go to play the cricket match. They'll say leg before wicket or no ball or wide or whatever, a set of rules. Once I start playing the match, I can't change the rules. I have to be within those rules. Of course, rules can change, but then that applies to the next match. It can't apply to the match that I'm already playing in. So this election is due, right? This election can't be postponed. The people are suffering. Those of us who are elected can't decide to take away people's right. So this is totally unacceptable, what actually is happening. And the election commissioner announces an election, and from the first day, there is some uncertainty created, non-stop uncertainty. And the latest, as Dr. Nalaka Godeheva just said, is the latest one is like, ballot papers can't be printed because of the cost. I mean, I will say, what kind of crap is this? Use your phone. You can vote with your phone, you can use technology. What are we talking about pieces of paper? What kind of crap are we talking? Not that technology can be used in this election. We have to go with what's already there. But, right, this is the triviality in which they are treating people and the sovereignty of people. The triviality. I don't think Sri Lankans should trust any leaders. Any leaders.
That's including the SJB leader as well?
Any leader means every leader. Any leader. Sri Lankans shouldn't trust any leader. I think election dates, the Sinhaleng they say a word name, Galin Kotanno, right, should be basically put in the constitution. These are the election days. Presidential, parliamentary elections, local council elections should be put. Leaders shouldn't have any discretion. Sri Lankan leaders have always misused their discretion. That's the people's right. It should be established. People should be allowed to actually decide.
Iran, you say that people of Sri Lanka should not trust leaders. That includes the leader of the SJB as well. Who must they trust?
Yeah, I know.
Who must they trust?
I know that you are trying to corner me. What I'm trying to say is this, right? What I'm trying to say is I'm not talking about individuals. I'm very much into systems. And when discretion is given, mature people in a mature democracy know how to use that discretion. Sri Lankan leaders have not used this discretion properly. That is why I'm saying, if they are not, you have got a track record of using discretion properly, let's define when the elections are, and no politician then can interfere with it. Elections are held on due dates as it is. People are suffering. We work within the rules, those of us who are elected.
Thank you very much, Iran Wickramaratne, the Member of Parliament of the Sabang Jana Balawegaya. There is no intention to corner you tonight, for sure, Iran. We are having a constructive discourse about the future of democracy in Sri Lanka, and that is the intention tonight. I now move my attention to Rohan Hettiarwachi, Executive Director of PAFRA. What are your thoughts, Rohan? Do you think elections are going to be held anytime soon?
Well, I am happy to go with Mr. Wickramaratne, because as an election observer group, we are going with the principles. I mean, we don't care about who is going to win, whether the ground is good for the ruling or opposition, because most of these political decisions over the years, over the decades, the ruling party, whoever run in the country, they try to took the advantage. So he correctly said that we have to have a scheduled elections and we have to have a periodic elections. But unfortunately, in this country, we don't have such a system or legal framework for that. Even the country like even Philippines, where we know what happened in the last elections, the Marcos' son came in with this corrupt political culture. But even that country, they have the scheduled elections. So our argument is these elections is scheduled before March 19th of 2023. In this country, most of the time, the government, whoever run the country, they have they took advantage to postpone the elections, but within the given legal framework. The minister has power to postpone for 1 year. And some time back, this has happened almost all the elections except 2 occasions, right, for the local elections. And some leaders, they had a staggered elections. They took the advantage on that. Staggered elections from provincial elections, local elections, both. But all of them has done it within the legal framework. But this is the first time the government is trying to postpone the elections, delay the elections without any legal frame. Because they have already taken this 1 year advantage. They postpone it, now the time has come. So that is why this everybody should stand for this. Because people may see this is not the time for elections. Even your question was not relevant to us, whether we should have elections or not. That's not relevant questions actually. Nowhere in the world that asking the people, asking the public whether you need the elections. Nowhere in the world where we are checking on the financial situations. It has scheduled either constitutions or the Elections Act. So in Sri Lanka also we do the same. The constitution has given a framework for that, even though we don't have a election calendar, but there is the provision for election, right? In addition, the Elections Act clearly stated. So now the Elections Commission act on based on the Elections Act. Actually, the parliamentarians, the one who really make this Elections Act and also the later, even in the existing elections, the amendments. So Elections Commission are duty bound to have elections before 19th of March. So that is, I mean, they have decided there are all the dates based on the Elections Act, Local Government Elections Act. Now, as both of them mentioned, these elections, the government has made a lot of effort to postpone the elections. More than 20 efforts we have identified now. Some of these efforts we can say that the government can say no, that is not our intention. But there are some clear intentions we can show. For example, now the letter issued by the Ministry of Public Administrations. So he quoted the cabinet decisions and issued the letter for returning officers. So I mean, without government backing, whether any secretary will take such a decisions. And recently government information department also issued the similar kind of letter. And we know how the delimitation committee was established. Within a single day, the 3 different government departments circulate the letter, and the same day they took the cabinet decisions. So we know how the government is working to postpone the elections.
Rona, you said something very interesting in your opening remarks. You said that we are independent and we take decisions for the betterment of the people of Sri Lanka.
Yeah.
But if you look at organizations, like let's take a look at the Campaign for a Free and Fair Election.
Yeah.
The executive director of the Campaign for a Free and Fair Election one time became the governor of the southern province under Maithripala Sirisena's government, and now went on to become the President's Director General of Community Affairs. Then we speak about organizations such as the Government Nursing Officers Association. The president of that organization is today the Director General of Trade Unions of the President. So whether or not the organizations that are campaigning for elections are free and fair is a big question mark. Whether they are independent is a big question mark.
No, I'm not going to criticize the other organizations because they are not here, right? So what I'm trying to say is, as PAFREL, I mean, we have been...
as PAFREL, just PAFREL alone.
Yeah.
Okay.
We have been here almost 40 years now. We established in 1980s with this Lampu Kalagadi, you know, the very famous elections.
The referendum.
So last 30 years or 40 years roughly, we have been working for free, fair elections. And I think you all can remember when we initiated in 1980s, how was the election situations? And even this, some presidential candidate, not only the violence.
But you accept that there are organizations that have political interest as well.
This is
Sri Lanka at the end of the day. This is Sri Lanka. Right. Thank you very much, Rohan Hettiarach, Executive Director of PAFREL. So I open the floor for questions from our journalists. On to my immediate right, again, as I said before, is Shania Darigama. On to my immediate left is attorney at law Sharon Benedict, and on to my far left is Mariam. So let's start off with Mariam.
Thank you, Shamir. I think all of us can agree that the country is in crisis, all sorts, including a political crisis. I'd like to pose my first question to Dr. Godaheva. You were with the SLPP when that party was at the height of power. And that party is the reason that the country is in so many crises right now. And now some of you all have got together and formed a new party. But why do you think the people should give you all another chance? Like, where do you all stand in terms of providing solutions to the people?
See, firstly, if you say SLPP is the reason why the country is in this situation, I do not agree to that. They are partly responsible. Because if you look at this economic crisis, it has a history. No country can go into bankruptcy in 2 years' time. The problem goes back probably almost 20 years, right? Let's say after the end of the war, we had an opportunity to overcome all the problems we have had due to 30 years long war and to develop this country in a systematic manner. But the things that were done by successive governments after that, 3 governments, did not help the economy much. So when it came to 2019, when the SLPP first comes to power by with the president, the country was already in economic turmoil. The country's economic growth, which was 5.5% in 2015, had gone down to 2.1%. Right? Rupee has got devalued. The debt has gone up from 7.4 trillion to 13 trillion. There were sovereign bonds which were obtained during 5-year period, which total up to about 12.5 billion US dollars. So all those problems were there. Where Gotabaya Rajapaksa's government, which I also represented, went wrong, but they couldn't prevent the problem. But we had told very categorically how we are going to do that in our manifesto, the Vistas of Prosperity manifesto, which was developed by a large number of intellectuals together with the support of so many other groups, had spelled out what we are going to do. But unfortunately what happened was, under Gotabaya Rajapaksa and his cabinet, who is basically the executive, did not implement the policy as we promised. So that is what went wrong. So that is why they couldn't prevent the problem, and finally the country got into
Dr. Godaheva, I'm trying to figure out. I cannot stomach that.
Let me finish. So what? To finish her question, so you're asking why should people trust us? People should trust the manifesto, not us, right? People should trust the manifesto, which is presented to people, which is not implemented by
Dr. Godaheva, in 2021, when everything was hunky-dory as far as the SLPP government was concerned, in May 2021, the fertilizer ban came into play. Don't all take responsibility for that?
No. Go back to the manifesto. That's why I said go back to the manifesto.
Manifesto very clearly articulates it's a 10-year program.
Exactly.
However, not immediately.
Exactly.
That was never mentioned in the manifesto.
Shamir, that's exactly my point. The manifesto said 10 years.
So if that was the case, you all should have walked out of the cabinet then.
I was not in the cabinet.
No,
I was not in the cabinet.
But you were a prominent minister at that time.
No, I was
state minister.
No, I was handling a state ministry of urban development, where I was doing my job. See, this problem, in a cabinet, there are responsible
You want
people.
to walk out, Dr. Godaheva, in February this year. That last year, February.
Correct.
After everything was over. After everything
Shamir,
was on a tipping point.
Now listen, when a government comes to power, we were in the government. I was in the government only 18 months, right? After 18 months, we come out. The president was there, of course, but we were there with the government only 18 months. 18 months is not a very long period. We were elected. I was elected for a 5-year term, right? So we had time to serve the people. But after 18 months, we took a decision to come out. So one can argue and say, why 18 months? It could have been 15 or it could have been 14. What's the difference? We didn't even complete 1/3 of our tenure.
Dr. Godaheva,
we decided to walk out.
I remember in 2020, now you said we need to go 20 years back to see why the country got bankrupt, and that a country can't go into bankruptcy within the period of 2 years. I think it was in 2020, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Vikramaratne, that I believe you and Harsha De Silva came out in Parliament and said, look here, we're going to face a liquidity issue like this, we need to go to the IMF. And it was at that point that members of your government who sat on your aisle of Parliament said, over my dead body. Ministers like Vasudeva Nanayakkara said, no way, over my dead body. Where did you stand when that matter came up?
If you go back to my speeches, my social media clips, etc., I have been saying that we have to go to IMF, even at the early parts of 2022. The discussion came up at that time. So there were different views. We were saying we have to go to IMF. right? So some people were saying we shouldn't. You quoted the example of Honorable Vasudevan Anakar. Yes, he said then shouldn't go. He will say the same thing even now. So people have different views within the same party. But at that time, we were not opposing that.
Mr. Vikramaratne, I just have a question for you, just diverting attention away. Scattered sentiment may reflect that there is a public lack of confidence in your party, because most of the reforms that you and your party speak of now, they may argue that there was an opportunity during the Yahapalana government to implement these reforms. What would you do now to restore public confidence in your manifestos and your party promises?
Yeah, thank you for asking that question. You're correct that there are some of us who came from the United National Party into the SJB, and that is why that question arises. However, the SJB is a new party, so it has those who have come from the old party and then those who have come from other places. And when that does happen, it raises some questions in the minds of people. Right? But if you look at it realistically, if you look at it, right, and we talk about this often, some of the things that we would have done, right, during that period, we were not able to do. But there are some things that we...
For example, what would you cite?
One thing I would cite, for example, is going after the corrupt, right? And I would not take personal responsibility for that. I think the leaders of the party are responsible for that. You see, particularly, right, legislation should have been brought in, going after the corrupt, right? Assets and liabilities, making it public, right, hasn't been done. In fact, recently I have presented to Parliament a private member's bill on it. But I kept saying, okay, let the bill take its time. But I've called upon the present president to make his assets public. I've called upon, there are two other past presidents sitting in Parliament. I've called on them to make the assets public. If they do it, then members of Parliament, we are all compelled then to do it. Countries are not changed by just making laws, but by example. So they don't. Then stolen assets, right? Everybody says there are stolen assets in the country, outside the country. There's a United Nations program on it. We just need to bring a law here, create an authority so that they can go after stolen assets. So that didn't happen during our time, and it hasn't still happened. Then, in addition to that, making the commission, SEABOC, the Commission, Anti-Bribery and Corruption Commission, independent. It's not independent. Presently, investigators are given by government. Governments change, investigators are withdrawn. All the investigations fall apart. And time goes by. That hasn't happened as well. So some of this is, right, politicians have responsibilities. Some of these politicians are not directly responsible. Look at, for example, if somebody has stolen and they have to be prosecuted, right? The Attorney General's department is supposed to do it. How many prosecutions have the AG's department done? Hardly any. Hardly any. So that is why we are now arguing, right? We are a new party. We have thought of these policies anew. And we are arguing strongly, saying there should be an independent public prosecutor. Because I was a State Minister of Finance, and hopefully nobody accused me of stealing $1. But there were institutions which I worked with, Customs, Inland Revenue, Excise. Did anybody say that the corruption levels in those went down? No, they didn't. So you can't rely on individuals. Systemic changes are needed to actually improve that. So I believe, right, that those things we couldn't do it in the past. That doesn't mean that we can't do it now. And
Eran, you brought in a very important point. You said that you can go and report to the UN because we know that the Stolen Asset Recovery Initiative is a partnership between the World Bank Group and the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime that supports international efforts to end safe havens for corrupt funds. Now, there is a program in place already.
Yeah.
Why are you waiting to get power to do this? You can even do it now.
No. You need it. I'll tell you why. You have to be practical about this. How do you go after these assets, right? I can tell you how you go after this, right? Basically, you know the concept of the investment bank? Like that, you have basically legal firms now who can actually do the investigation. Now, ABC in Australia, a few months ago, you had a program talking about, corrupt deals of Australian companies with the Rajapaksa regime. And they talked about transactions even in Hambantota. ABC viewed this on their national television in Australia. Right, so everybody sees the program. These investigative journalists have done it. and after that nothing happens. What do we do if we have an authority, have a law, and we have an authority to go after stolen assets? We empower that authority. We tell that authority to go over it. What do? They can actually, then because they are empowered, they can use investigators in those jurisdictions.
But isn't that the jurisdiction or the job of the commission to investigate allegations of bribery or corruption?
So I said that this corruption commission presently is not independent. I started by saying that it's not independent. So that is why
we have the laws.
No,
we have.
Yeah,
We have the necessary guidelines. We have the regulations in place.
Yeah.
It's just that we don't have the political will to execute all this.
I don't disagree with you for a moment that there's a lack of political will. I don't disagree with that for a moment. But knowing that there is a lack of political will, I want to tighten the legal system, and I want to also tighten the prosecutorial system. I was State Minister of Finance. Tomorrow I rob. I'm advised by the Attorney General's department because they are the advisor to the government. They are my lawyer. The next day after I have robbed, they are supposed to file charges against me. That just doesn't happen. That is why I'm arguing that you need an independent public prosecutor. Doesn't matter if governments come and go, right? Once the case is in their hands, the case has to be pursued.
Who is responsible for this economic mess? Now, you've been in government since 2016, 2019.
Yes.
Dr. Godaheva is saying we can't be solely responsible because we were only in power for 18 months.
Yeah.
Then who is responsible?
Yeah, so I have to be honest with you that Sri Lanka has been a twin deficit country. And it has been a twin deficit, meaning budget deficit, balance of payments deficit. It's been like that for decades. And therefore, every government is responsible for the structural failure. But where this present government is responsible is others, yes, they didn't completely solve the structural issues in the economy. But this government is responsible in that took irresponsible decisions and created huge solvency problems. Example, the loss.
Decisions and huge solvency problems. Dr. Godaheva, no, that's a good point.
I'm in agreement. What I said was, that this government is responsible for not doing their job. When they came, they knew there's going to be a problem. It is not a surprise. 2 years before, we knew the problem was coming. Everybody was talking about that. Even from inside, we were saying that. But they couldn't prevent that. So they definitely mismanaged. There's no question about it.
Dr. Godaheva, let's look at one of your statements from the 15th of June 2021. I don't know whether you recollect what happened on that day, but let me refresh your memory. You say that ministers don't have as many luxury vehicles as you think. And then you say that you are using your own vehicle and 2 other private vehicles for official purposes, although you are entitled to get 3 official vehicles. Now, this was in 2021 when all this, before all this happened. So even at that time, you as a state minister was requesting for luxury?
No, not at all. In fact, now you've gone back to that instance. Let me explain what happened. I was explaining to a couple of journalists. In fact, I didn't know that they were recording that. I was explaining to them about an MP who was traveling by bus to Parliament. It's Dr. Tilak Rajapaksa, who is with us right now, with one of the 13 MPs who left. He was traveling every weekend by bus to Colombo. He's an MP. I was referring to MPs. I was saying a lot of people think when you go to Parliament, everybody is getting vehicles. I was trying to explain to those guys, it is not. The MPs are not getting vehicles. I was saying there's one MP who travels by bus to the Parliament, and that was misquoted. I was not referring to the ministers. Ministers, of course, every minister is entitled for...
it's not that you wanted a luxury vehicle.
Not at all. Not at all. I never used Shamir. I didn't even take security. I probably am the only Parliament MP in the Parliament right now who never asked for security.
So let's talk about
whether as a minister or as a parliamentarian, I have never asked for anything.
Let's talk about the future of elections now. Your party, the Freedom People's Alliance, is looking at contesting from the symbol of the helicopter. Now, Shalan posed a very important question to you with regard to the IMF stand as well. Now, one of the constituent parties are against going to the IMF. That is Minister Vasudeva Nanayakara's party. Now, how do you manage all this?
See,
now you all are looking at securing power one day in this country. And you all have double standards within the party itself. How can you all steer a country with having disputes within a political party?
Samir, we must explain this alliance first. See, this alliance was formed to face the local government election, right? The alliance was formed only on 11 January.
This is temporary.
No, not temporary. I'm saying it is still evolving. The election was called in January. On the 11th of January, 12 parties got together and formed an alliance. At that time, we were trying to get as many opposition parties possible together to contest this election. So 12 parties agreed, right? That does not mean that same 12 parties are the ones going to face a general election or a presidential election. It could be more, it could be less, because you need to discuss and agree on the overall national policy framework. So obviously there are differences.
So then that means Vasudeva Nalakar will step out at that time.
No, I won't say that. We may, who knows? I might step out. Anything is possible. Anything is possible. But what I'm saying is, these
why
these
must we have faith in a temporary setup?
No, it's not a temporary setup. What I'm saying is, when these things are discussed in detail, this alliance might grow in number or can come less. Anything is possible.
So now SLFP is with the Freedom People's Alliance?
SLFP as a party is with the Freedom Alliance. At the same time, one group of SLP are contesting separately in certain districts.
So I didn't understand that. Now SLFP is with the Freedom People's Alliance, but I saw a statement that was made by Maithripala Sirisena saying that they won't be going with the Freedom People's Alliance. Only on certain electorates they will contest together, and on certain electorates they will contest from the hand symbol.
I also don't understand why they do that, but let me explain their argument. See, when the way this local...
Can I simply say SLFP is with the Freedom People's Alliance? Maithripala Sirisena is not with the People's Freedom Alliance. Can I safely say that?
It appears so. It appears so because they were originally with the Freedom Alliance. The original agreement was everybody would contest on the helicopter symbol, but at one point they took a decision in certain districts they will contest under hand symbol.
Dr. Godaheva, if I can add to that.
Yeah.
You said that the party formed with the initial intention of preparing for the local government election. But some people, they think that the local government election is not going to be as effective as we are thinking it will be. What do you think about that? What is your plan? Because if you all are not going to take part in like or contest for a general election or presidential election with this party, what are your plans after the local government election?
No. I think you misunderstood. What I didn't say that we are not contesting under this party.
Okay.
Or with all good intentions, we want to continue this. We have formed an alliance, we want to refine it, and we want to continue. If all 12 parties stick together, better. In fact, we want more.
Okay.
When we were demanding a local government election, actually 16 parties came together. At one point, there were 25 parties sitting together and demanding a local government election along with us. Not all parties are represented in the parliament. So our intention is to grow this alliance, and we might invite some bigger parties also in time to come, because at the end of the day, we think now the country is in a total economic mess. We have to come out of this situation. We as politicians have a responsibility to work towards that. In that, we believe as many parties as possible have to come together. But there are certain principles that we need to agree. One is the economic management policy, which has to be debated in greater detail.
Dr. Godaheva, there's been a lot of scrutiny over, what you have said and a lot of things in the past. But looking to the future, what are your recommendations for stimulating foreign investment?
See, before stimulating foreign investment, you need to stimulate the local economy. That's where the current government is going wrong. See, the answer to all these ills is to get the economy activated now. So what is an economy? Economy is a collection of exchanges. Somebody sells, somebody buys, there are exchanges that are taking place. And unless you grow these exchanges, the economy is not going to grow. What do you mean by GDP, gross domestic product, is a collection of exchanges. So, in Sri Lanka right now, who is suffering most with the current government's economic policies? The small and medium business sector. The bigger businesses are no difference. Everybody is struggling. So rather than encouraging these people and supporting these people to increase their activities, the government's high taxation policy, high interest policy, and all those things are actually contracting the economy. So we don't believe in that. We believe in supporting the small and medium sector. We believe in supporting the professionals, getting this whole economic activities revamped once again. In fact, that is what we're talking about, 2019 as well.
So when Iran spoke about getting the former presidents to declare their assets, I think that's going to be very important and prudent, Iran. You know why? Because now the former president has to pay 100 million Sri Lankan rupees as compensation to the victims of the April 21st East bombing. So then we can see how he's going to fund this money. Iran?
Yes, of course.
Is that?
I think there's a lot more than that 100 million that all these leaders will have to explain once the declarations have been made.
All right.
You see, so we have to basically, wait for that.
Yeah.
Can I just take 1 minute more?
Yes.
Yeah, that is because you asked me earlier about the economy and then we went into the anti-corruption thing. Yes, we have been in office for a short period in the last 30 years. We haven't had a president whom we have really supported from our party in 30 years. But we have had short periods of government. In the 2015-19 government, right, we saw the problem. We negotiated with the IMF. And in the early part, we had some changes. In 2017, Mangala Samaravira and I went into the finance ministry and there were some changes that were made. When we took over, government revenue was only 10% of GDP, right? And we got it closer to 13% of GDP in a very, very short period of time. So it came through taxation, but revenue is going up, but revenues had to go up. Not only that, the tax files, right? The tax net was tremendously expanded from approximately 965,000 tax files to 1.5.
So we know all this good
5 million. No. I want to say that, you know why? I need to complete this.
Yeah.
I'll complete very quickly. And the reason I'm saying that is, I agree that there are structural problems that have been there right through. Fiscal discipline hasn't been there. We brought fiscal discipline in. A primary balance in Sri Lanka for 74 years was achieved only 5 times. That's where revenue is more than expenditure without financial costs. Out of those 5 times, 2017, 2018 were 2 of the time.
2 of the time.
And the accusation for us was
yes,
the debt.
Coming to that. The debt.
Yeah, I'm going to comment on that.
NPP is accusing the Yahapalne government for obtaining massive amount of
that's
loans.
right. I'm going to address that as well.
And
not
you
only
will
the
state
positives.
minister at that time.
That's exactly. Not only the positives. I'm trying to tell you what the accusation is as well.
How you can construe it up cornering you.
No. It's about the debt as well. It's about the debt as well. And if you examine the debt that we took during that period, more than 80% of the debt was servicing the debt. More than that. In addition to that, right, we had 2 elections coming, and what did we do? We went and took on debt, more debt, and there was about 6.7 billion or something dollars as reserves. So on one hand you had the debt, on the other hand you had the reserves as well. So look at it in context. Then, if anybody is listening to me, go into the internet, right, and you go in and you look at Verite Research. There's a research paper just on this issue of debt during our period. All the facts and figures are there, and you can see if anything I have said is contrary to what the researchers are saying, please call Samir and tell him on the phone so that he can follow it up with me now.
Samir is well versed with what's happening in Sri Lanka, and I will pose the questions to you momentarily, but I'm just going to pick Rohana's brain first.
Can I have a minute?
Yeah.
Mr. Iran Vikramaratne.
Yes.
How are the local government elections important for your party? Do you think you all will have real power if the former rulers are still, if they are still going to be in power as well? How will your party?
Yeah, I think the first principle is democracy. The second is who actually wins the election and to what extent. First principle is democracy. For the sake of democracy and to have a democratic way of life, the local government elections must be held. And if you're asking us how our party is going to fare, we are very confident that we are going to be the party nationally with probably the largest support base, and the elections will show that we are the party that will emerge with the largest support base. Obviously, there will be other parties, and this time there are lots of independent groups, smaller groups competing, and there will be some...
You all don't have a problem with the NPP.
Meaning?
So when you say smaller groups, are you referring to the NPP as well, or?
Yeah. All the smaller parties, right, will obviously, and then it's also going to get diffused.
So the NPP
because
is a small party, not a force to be reckoned with at the next election.
I mean, what is the basis on which we can really talk about that? It's history. This conversation has come up from time to time when governments have been in power and people feel frustrated and they keep saying that we are going to go and give a protest vote. And then suddenly they will say, oh, we are going to give it to this particular group or party. What is NPP? It's dominated by the JVP. So what are we talking about? This is a well-known fact. The country knows about it. The history of these parties are known. It's even known that they brought in, right, Mahinda Rajapaksa to power. That's how the change happened. Mahinda Rajapaksa was brought in. So I can show you those clips on my phone if you want to.
Shall we listen to Rohana with regard to the elections, because he's been silent for some time now. Rohana, now interesting. Now you're listening to two gentlemen from represent two political parties, one onto your immediate left and one onto your immediate right. So if you have a question, you can pose to them as well, Rohana, during the conversation or debate that we're having today. Well, tell me. Now, today we heard the government printer's head of operations talking to the media and saying that they've not got money yet. Tell us the history with regard to the government printer's role during an election. Can they print these ballot papers at their discretion? How does the process work so the people are aware?
Well, they are duty bound to print the ballot papers, whatever the elections, according to the constitution, right? Yeah,
without money?
With or without money, yes.
Okay.
But now the present situation is little different. I mean, we can't compare with all past elections because these are completely different situations, because there is a government circular also in. But the problem here is which one is the highest power, whether the constitutions or the president's circular. For us, I think for the people of the country, the constitution is the most powerful tool, right? So in that angle, the government printer has to respect the Elections Commission's guidance. So let me say a few the previous experience in government printing.
Please, yes.
Now in 2010 parliamentary elections. The elections took place in April 8, but they have paid on August 12. So after completely 4 months, they have not get any single rupee as advance. Then again, same thing in 2015 parliamentary elections. The elections held August 17. The payment start on October 21st, and they took almost 2 months to settle the payment. Then again, the recent elections. The 2019 presidential elections, they have not single cent paid before the elections. The entire payment they took 8 months. Then the last local elections also, they paid only 20% advance. The rest of the money paid after 6 months. So this is the official figures which we have. So now the government printer are duty bound to print these ballot papers. But then at the same time, as I mentioned earlier, that the president has issued a circular that none of these government departments to do in any kind of activity in a loan basis.
It has to be with money.
With the money.
Yes.
And the priorities areas also has given in that circular.
So do you think the president is doing all this?
Well, I think it's very simple questions, no?
No, I don't know. You tell me.
No, I mean
it's very simple. Maybe
very simple for the people of this country, even in the general public. I mean, we can realize
who's doing all this.
Who is behind this?
Who's
the
doing
president? President, government. I mean, I can't say the president
That's
itself.
a very serious allegation.
No, the government. So, I mean, the president is the head in the government. He's the head of the state. The government is the one who is responsible to support, according to the constitution again, the president.
So who doesn't want election? The government doesn't want election, or is it the president who doesn't want an election?
That is, we do not know. Maybe the both. And we do not know who is the government exactly. I mean, whether it's the majority of the
I have a
parliament.
question about that also.
Yeah, that's true. Let me finish my initial logic behind why people should stand with these elections. Because some people are saying that whether we need to have elections, so this is economic crisis, and we have to look at the people's day-to-day needs. And some are saying that we have to settle the economic crisis first. But my principal argument is, if we allow the government to postpone without having any legal framework, so this can be a bad practice, bad experience for any elections. In the coming years, whoever run in the country, they can come and say, look, in 2020, 2023, we had this economic crisis, so we postponed the elections. And they can come up with various other reasons also. Maybe the natural disaster, they can come and say same thing. Even the harvesting period, they can say, look, most of the farmers are harvesting this time frame, so you can't have elections.
So that means there won't be elections at all.
Exactly. That is why all the people who, whether you like or not, for the local elections, you have to stand with the elections. And also I wanted to highlight with this government circulars. Now, in the past, all the government officials were supported to the elections commissions. They never say no. But with this circular, this uncertainty created by the government, now in case if government official did not respect, do not respect the elections commission's guidance, what will happen? So that is why we need to stand with the elections commission as well as the elections, because this is not just election.
So Rona, you've been working with PAPFREL for a very long period of time, and PAPFREL was established during the referendum that was initially came to being during the J.R. Jayawardena era in Sri Lanka. In your experience, do you think the opposition political parties are vying for an election now to show their political might to the government on the 9th of March? Is that why they want an election?
I mean, for me, it's not a matter, because I'm not going to give a political answer. But as I said earlier, so we are in a principal stand, right? Whoever get the advantage or disadvantage.
No, but do you think the opposition parties will get an advantage? Let me rephrase this question.
Yeah.
Do you think opposition parties will get an advantage if an election is held on the 9th of March?
Most probably, look like, right? So, but it all depends on the people's choice. It can change in the last minute. But let me come back what the discussions Dr. Godeheva. I mean, giving due respect to him, the manifesto in this country is a joke.
It's a joke?
It's a joke. I mean, all these manifestos, if you look at in the past, are quite nice documents, right? All the good things are into it. But when it has to be legally challenged.
Yesterday, the SJB also unveiled a blueprint. That's also a joke.
No, but let me finish.
Yeah.
So my argument is,
no, when you say a joke, you have to be very clear, Ro.
Let me finish. Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. So when you bring your manifestos, when you prepare your manifestos, there should be a time frame. Okay, first 6 months. I mean, I think you all can remember this 100 days period. So they had a clear path.
During the 100 days, Brian Wickremesinghe robbed the central bank.
No, that's a different scenario. But what I'm trying to say is, the manifesto has to give a clear time frame. First 6 months, what you are going to implement. Because otherwise, they can stay for 4.5 years or 5 years or 4.5 years. Then they can say next 6 months we will do everything, right? The time frame has to be there. Then the manifesto should address how they are going to bring the resource into it. Because without resource, you can't implement that. No. And what is your implementation plan? How you are going to monitor? If there is such a plan, so people can monitor that. There are countries where people monitor time to time and look at the percentage, how far they have implemented. So even in Sri Lanka, my demand, my request, manifesto has to be legal document. At least if you can't make it legal, but there should be a time frame, financial system.
Yeah. Dr. Godeheva, manifesto, just let me listen to Dr. Godeheva's thoughts and I'll give you an opportunity, Shania. Manifestos are a joke.
I think what Mr. Hettiarachchi meant was manifestos have become a joke because they are not being implemented. I for a moment don't say manifesto is a joke, because without a manifesto, how does a political party tell the people what they are going to do? So manifesto is something very, very important for a political party who's going for an election. But I think he corrected that. He said it has to be made a legal document. It has to be a contract. I would go further. I would go and say, when a manifesto is presented, the public must challenge it, ask for clarifications, ask for improvements, and then it has to be a binding contract. In that, I think what he's trying to say is correct, because a political party must tell the people what they're going to do. People must challenge and agree on timelines and all other conditions. The concept of manifesto is definitely not a joke. It is something, a must.
I do agree. Let me add one point. I perfectly respect his view. Actually, my point also the same. But let me look at this budget now. Budget also the similar kind of document, right?
That's
so
also
budget,
we see
the budget has passed 1 month or 1.5 months ago. The budget has the parliament. Both of them are parliamentarians, so they are the authority. The parliament do have authority to allocate the funds. So 1.5 months ago, they have allocated
10 billion.
10 billion. But now, what is happening?
But Mr. Hettiarachchi, now you're speaking about principles and concepts of democracy, all very good. But this is a question from the people, actually. What the people are wondering now, the people have a president that they did not vote for. They didn't even send him to parliament. He came in through the national list. There is a government that has gone completely against the mandate that was given to them by, like Dr. Godeheva mentioned, 6.9 million people. They've gone completely against that mandate. Now we are facing a situation where elections are also uncertain. And the reason why I'm saying that elections are uncertain is because the Elections Commission has now come forward, and from time to time they're saying, maybe we won't be able to hold the postal votes on time, maybe we won't be able to hold the election on the due date, 9th of March. So elections are uncertain. So as an election monitor, now I know that you're demanding for the election to be held, yes, that's all for the election monitor, as you are an election monitor. But what are the people really supposed to do at a moment like this? I mean, they're economically being stepped on, their wills are, their wishes are not being taken into account by the government. What can the people do?
No, it all depends on the demand. No, I mean, when you look at the parliament now, as you mentioned, that whether it's a president, whether he has a mandate from the people is a different. But the parliament has given legally their mandate. People elect parliamentarians as their representative. With the manifesto, whatever Dr. Godeheva mentioned, right? Whether the parliamentarians are respect their voters, their constituents, whether they respect. So unfortunately, people doesn't have a choice. So what we can do as a citizens, we need to make our demand. It's like the demand and supply. Always political parties saying, even during elections, we are putting winning horse, right? So we need to change the winning horse criteria. So we wanted to make our demand to the politicians. So that is what happened during Aragale period. So democratically elected president has to leave the positions. That is just because of the people demands. So always there is a power with the people. So people has to use it. Even in these elections, my request for the public in this present positions, the people has to come out and say we need to have a local election. And those who can fight at the court, they should file the case. It can be 100 cases, maybe 1,000 cases. They need to make their demand. Then only the politicians will realize that they can't play with the people. Now always, not always actually, most of the time we have seen how the ruling party play with the power game, whoever run in the country. That can be little difference person to persons, government to government, but the same role they play.
Mr. Hettiarachchi,
One minute. Mr. Vikramaratne, I just have 2 points of concern to raise with you. I was just wondering what would be, how would a delay in the elections impede our negotiation process for the 2.9 billion IMF bailout? And secondly, at yesterday's blueprint for recovery, or as you call it, blueprint for recovery, at the presentation, the SJB leader sort of mentioned that the SJB's stance and the method in which they carry out these negotiations with the IMF would differ to how the current government is conducting it. So if you could just clarify those points.
I think in principle we need to be clear that the government has to negotiate with the IMF and come to an understanding. It's very little to do with the $2.9 billion that they might get at the end of it, but it's a lot more to do with the fact that people have lost confidence in this country, government and in the country. They've lost confidence. They don't think that the rule of law really works. They don't think that there's fiscal discipline in this country. So what an IMF agreement does is it creates a level of confidence in the markets that these people are going to have fiscal discipline. And that's what this agreement does. And so therefore, we are hoping that the Ranil Wickremesinghe's administration will actually succeed with the IMF agreement. Where we differ is on this. We differ on the conditionalities. And you can have more than one view on that. I will give you one example, right? Definitely you have to tax because you have to get your revenue up. We did that ourselves. We had an arrangement with the IMF in the past regime, when we were in government in the past.
You all increased up to 24%.
Yes, yes. So the revenues had to go up. I think my main criticism, and I said this during the budget, was that was fiscal consolidation based on revenue. The country is in a crisis. You can't do it now based on revenue only. You should have actually looked at expenses and costs as well, and really rationalized your cost and expense.
How would you all do it differently?
Yeah, so you would have, obviously, there are no quick answers, but public service for sure, you would have had to basically look at it. You would have had to look at defense expenditures for sure. You would have had to look at it. So you would have had to go one by one, one by one. There are no quick answers, but at least the IMF will believe you if you had a program.
How much of money are you going to save by cutting down defense expenditure, and how is that going to affect the country's cash flow at the end of the day?
Yeah, so it is like this. The answer to that is very complicated. If I put it another way, defense expenditures are about 10%, right, of expenditures, defense expenditures. It's very large. It's one of the largest in Asia. India is the highest, it's about 9. Every other country in Asia is 5 or less. That includes Australia and New Zealand and all that. So clearly everybody agrees that Sri Lanka is overspending 12 years after a war. In fact, we are spending more on defense than education and health put together. And this is totally unacceptable. So it has to be. So as I said, right, what the government should have done is shown a project over a period of time how defense expenditure was going to come down relatively. Right? That should have been shown. Public sector reform, we should show it. You go all over. We have one public servant to roughly 16 Sri Lankan citizens. If you take a country like Japan, it's like 1 to 4. And we are 1 to 16. It shows something about our efficiency levels. Therefore, a program, you can't do lots of these things overnight, but a program on the cost side should have been shown. There's no effort to show that at all. So you're only trying to handle it only based...
So you're trying to say if an SJB government comes into power, y'all are going to cut down the state sector employees by how much?
No, that's not what I'm saying. I can't tell you exactly the numbers of how much it will be cut by. I will do it another way.
How so?
I'm not only looking at the numbers that have been cut. The state sector has been ruined by the politicians in this country. At elections, they promised to employ people and put people, and that's how the state sector has been ruined. It's not the fault of the employees in the state sector. It's the fault of the politicians in the state sector. What we should do is to create an efficient state sector. People who are working in the states, the most brilliant minds will come into the state sector in our country. We should be spending, giving them market salaries. Numbers, everybody focuses on numbers. It's not numbers, it's a quality issue in the state sector. These brilliant minds come in, they should be given market salaries. We should be investing, for example, in training for state sector employees, right? So that is why I said this is not a program where somebody will say you're cutting it by 100,000 or 200,000 and you know, all these slogans, and then you go and tell the country, oh, මේගොල්ලන් ආවොත් මේක නැති කරලා දාලා, you know, and ඡන්දයට එක ප්‍රශ්නයක් වෙයි. We don't get caught in that discussion. Everybody in this country agrees that they are not satisfied with their local council. They can't get an approval done in time. They have to pay a bribe. Wherever you go in the state sector, everybody, any research will show you that. So what are the people of this?
We have a question from one of our viewers, Iran. Do you and your party members think that your to-do list is practical when some members of your party were accused of corruption and now they're in the political stage? And if your wish list cannot be fulfilled by you or your members of the party, do you agree to resign respectfully, like the UK Prime Minister?
Yeah, I think the question doesn't really arise, right? Because we are not, some of us have come into this not to run away. We have come into this to correct it, We are not going to run away. So you said that there are some people in our party who are corrupt,
Yeah.
right? We don't care whether they are in our party or whether they are in the opposition. The laws will have to apply to all. And I'm telling those people who have sent that message, right, to go and institute a case against those party members of the SJB whom they think who are corrupt now.
Iran, we've seen that happening even during 2006-2007.
No,
CID cases that were there.
No, not FCID. I'm
You
saying is
told before that there was that story of some redress from the court.
No, I'm saying now. Okay, now we are not in power. No, if it's our party members, right, we are not in power. Go to the judiciary.
That is exactly what Namal Rajapaksa always says in the political platform.
No.
You all were in power. What did you all do?
No. Don't make that as an excuse. We are not in power. And you are saying that Iran Vikramaratne or X or Y or Z has stolen money. I am challenging those people to go to court now because it's the other party in power. What is the excuse? Then remember this, it's nothing to do with parties. Then we can see if the professionals of this country will stand up. This country is... This country is not in the mess. Let's not distract from this discussion. This country is not in a mess only because of its politicians. Let's get this straight. I've been a professional and come into politics. Few of us only have done that. This country is not in a mess only because of its politicians. If those cases are instituted, the AG's department, the lawyers, the judges in this country should stand up and make sure that the law is implemented and justice is done by the public of this country.
Between 2016 and 2019, where were you?
Don't worry about politicians. Between 16 and 19, right, the Attorney General's department, the judiciary, they should stand up. Right, this time to pass the buck and say it's all politicians who are responsible must stop. Professionals must stand up. And therefore I'm saying, if you are bringing the accusation that there are people who are corrupt in my party, I'm telling you to take it to court. We are not in power now. Take it to court and let them institute the case. Let the case be heard in the judiciary. Let the judiciary give a verdict. We are politically, you can't punish people. You have to punish people through judicial processes. And I'm saying, while we are in opposition, because if I'm in government, you will say, oh, you're in government, you're going to shield them. We are not in government now. Therefore, if we want to put this country right, well, let's get this straight. Everybody has to stand up. Politicians alone won't put this country. Because look at it like this.
If action was taken between 2015 and 2019, the Yahapalne government president, right after being elected as president of the country, said, I would have been 6 feet under if I would have lost the elections. If the Yahapalne government took proper action at that time, I don't think even in 2019, Gotabaya Rajapaksa would have even had the guts to stand in as president of the country.
Okay, now take your argument, your logic. You said that they didn't take action. Name them. Name them. Maithripala Sirisena, president of the country. Name them. Ranil Wickremesinghe, prime minister of the country. You name whomever you want.
State Minister Ran Wickramaratne,
right, so
Minister of Finance.
Right, so name them. Right, now what I'm saying is
Minister of Housing, Sajid Premadasa.
No.
I'm naming the cabinet.
No, you are taking away from the argument, Shamir. Don't take away from the argument. This is serious. I am saying those people who you claim failed, and if they have robbed or stolen, I am telling you, take them to court now, because we are in opposition. Take them to court now. We mustn't just get into the sake of argument, get into an argument. We need to put this country right and the systems right in this country. Therefore, I am saying, they said there was a bond scam, and we hit the bond scam. I am saying here openly, please take the people you are accusing on the bond scam now, because they are not in power. At least all of them are not in power.
I must admit that point, because right after the bond scam happened, I remember you came on the show in March 2015, and you were one of the people alongside with Harsha who said that those who are accused have to be taken to book. So I respect you for that, at that time. So I have a question for you, Dr. Gudheva, from one of our viewers as well. Please ask Dr. Gudheva, why was he adamantly in denial of the Express Pearl disaster and its impact on the environment and livelihoods of the people of Sri Lanka? You said at that time that compensation can be obtained. What was done about it for quantifying the damage by any institution or the compensation received? Can you explain?
Samir, for the gentleman or the lady, tell her.
Sure, it's definitely sure it's a male.
So you tell him.
Yes.
So you tell him
Right.
that Dr. Nalaka Gudheva was the state minister in charge only for 2 weeks. After the Express Pearl incident took place, after 2 weeks, that institute, MIPA, was taken out of me and handed over to a different state minister, and there was a committee, ministerial committee, 4 members responsible for handling all these compensation. I was not part of that, so I'm not in a position to answer.
Isn't that the very reason that accountability has to lie as far as government sector employees or ministers are concerned?
I think there has to be accountability, but I'm saying accountability on the part of the person who handled it. No? Accountability can be on the part of somebody who was never there when that compensation process was handled. I was not there.
So,
Shamir, before we move on,
please.
Mr. Iran Vikramaratne, can you guarantee that representatives from the SJB for the local government election, that none of them are corrupt? Can you guarantee that to the audience?
You can't guarantee that.
So the SJB has corrupt
no, it's something like this, right? There is no perfect party and there are no perfect individuals. We need to be just realistic, right? But what we are saying is, if the system is in place, and if you can say X has cheated or Y has cheated, then, right, you need to institute a case and then we will take disciplinary action. But they can be punished actually by the judiciary. You see, so that's what I'm saying is, that's the way the system works, right? There is no perfect church, there is no perfect temple, there is no perfect old boys union or old girls union, no perfect political party. Let's be realistic, but let's put the systems in place.
So you agree that some representatives from the SJB contesting for the local government elections can be corrupt?
No, I can't agree or disagree with it, because I won't know.
Maybe.
Before, I won't know. I won't know that. When local government people come and they apply, as you know, we advertise throughout the country, thousands of people applied.
But there's a nomination board, right?
Yeah, nomination board, interview process is done, some due diligence is there, but nothing is perfect, right? Nothing is perfect. And therefore, if you can point out, then they will take some action.
Mr. Vikramaratne, what you said regarding the public sector being bloated, I think that's an argument that we've been discussing on for the longest period of time.
Yeah.
However, every government uses this, in Sinhala you call it carrot tale, to kind of appease the public or bring the public to vote for them. And the issue of public sector being bloated, I personally faced it a few days back, and I guess that's why it resonated with me so well. I was at the post office. I wanted to send a registered post letter. And I was standing in a very long line and wondering what's the hold up. To see these people, we were standing to buy stamps. There are 2 people to issue stamps. However, unfortunately, both people have gone for lunch at the same time. So there's no one to issue stamps. But anyways, Mr. Vikramaratne, just getting back to the point, I believe the general election that was contested after Maithripala Sirisena won the election. Correct me if I'm wrong, but there was a promise under the manifesto that the United National Party at the time presented, which you were a part of and contested and made your way into parliament, it was, if I'm, correct me if I'm wrong, but it was a picture of Ranil Wickremesinghe on the cover page.
Yeah.
And there was a promise to increase the number of state sector jobs by 500,000.
Yeah.
So you backed that promise at the time.
Yeah,
you know?
I to tell you frankly, I can't remember about 500,000 job increase at all. I can't remember. I like to see that. If there was such a thing, I'll be surprised if there was such a thing. Verbally, there may be many people who go on stages and say various things about giving jobs, etc., etc. But I don't think that there would have been anything in writing like that. It can't be. It will be so ridiculous because the total public service is about 1.2 billion. At the armed forces, it's about 1.5 billion. So that's no way that anybody with the census would actually put.
But Mr. Wickremesinghe, now the issue in public sector or bloated public sector is the public sector is not like the private sector.
Yeah.
In the private sector, I mean, there are labor laws in Sri Lanka that are a little bit, favouring the employee, if I may. But that is to protect the employee, of course. But when it comes to the public sector, it's a whole different ballgame. I mean, a dismissal of a public sector employee could result in a fundamental rights application and millions and millions in compensation. So, on how to fix this?
Yeah.
What kind of? I mean, I'm not asking for a quick answer, but what are the possible avenues that we can explore?
A follow-up question to that, Iran. So one of our viewers are also posing a question saying that you are saying that the public sector is politicized. Will the SJB appoint permanent secretaries to ministries if that's the case?
Yeah. So I
Two questions.
That change will need a constitutional change. But I am all for going back there when the constitutional review is done, because I believe that it's better to have a permanent secretary and a permanent government system without the politician becoming the CEO in a sense. And then if I'm appointed as a minister, I look whether I can work with the secretary or I get the secretary changed or whatever, which is not good, it's not permanent. So I think that needs to be done. Now, on public sector reform, I would say it like there is no quick answer on it. But there is an answer for public sector reform and how you will actually go about doing it. Now, in the 2001-04 government, I was not a politician then. I was just a banker then. In the 2001-04 government, there were some decisions made on the public sector. One of the decisions was no political hiring. Two, right, VRS scheme was being introduced, right, and a public sector reform, how to reform the public sector.
And at that time, I remember not even jobs were given to new recruits.
Not given. 2001-04 government. No, I'm not a politician then, and I'm just telling you what actually happened at that period, right? This whole system was being worked on. What did the JVP get on to the streets and do? They got in with Mahinda Rajapaksa. This is a case in point, I'm telling you. And they said, I mean, I can show you Andhra Kumara Disanayaka's speech in Parliament on that, right? Public sector right? This is the words that were used, and they said they are giving money, right? And they are giving VRSs, and they are doing all of these things, and this is to destroy the public sector of the country. What kind of crap is this, right? I mean, 20 years later, of course, I must say to his credit, he has changed, because about 2 weeks ago he made a statement saying that the public sector is a huge burden on the country. It needs to be reformed. 20 years too late, like in Sri Lanka, lots of things are 20 years too late. But at least 20 years later, they are admitting that you have an overburdened public sector. It needs to be reformed. At least the start of it is there. So,
but in his defense, Mr. Wickremesinghe, let's take, for example, the number of political. You said no perfect political parties. So there were political appointees to the state sector under the SJB. There were political appointees to the state sector under the SLPP, under the SLFP. So if you take the number of political appointees into the state sector under the SJB and under the NPP or the JVP, as it were, at the time, I'm pretty sure you outweigh them.
No, I think there's no point. There's no point comparing it. Because
since you were comparing.
No. There's no point. No, there's no point comparing that. I didn't compare that. I was saying about policy. It's not how they have what they said when a government of the past tried to reform the public sector.
Will it change that never? No?
Right. How they now they have 20 years later. It's good that they have come to that position. Numbers wise, there is nothing, right? Because numbers wise, right? How does the system work? Numbers wise. It works on the ministries, right? It works on the ministries that you have ministries, right? and then you have institutions under it, and then you appoint people as board of directors into it, and then you basically, if employee vacancies are there, the minister has a role in actually nominating. That's how it works, right? It's a systemic fix that we need. The systemic fix is like Shamil said, was have a permanent public sector. That's one systemic fix. The other is take state-owned enterprises, for example, right? I don't think we should put it under the ministries. If state-owned enterprises, our policy in SJB is, right, minimum government ownership, only in strategic areas. So that can be in finance, in food security, in energy security. You put it there. Other areas, no, public-private partnerships, or give it to the private sector. If the government wants to benefit in terms of an investment return, then we need to have a Khazana or a Temasek kind of model in the hands of people who know how to run it, not in the hands of ministers or politicians. They make the decision whether the government should invest in something or not, because they want to get a return for the government. That's different. That is our present policy. That's what we want to
Dr.
see.
Gudeva, what is the stand of the Freedom People's Alliance on economic policy in Sri Lanka? Because yesterday, with so much of pomp and pageantry on Valentine's Day, the SJB unveiled its economic blueprint. What is the policy of the Freedom People's Alliance? Now you all are going for an election as well, so it's important to discuss about it.
Freedom People's Congress, which we formed after we left the government, the 13 MPs, presented our economic policy and also our political framework at BMICH about 3 months ago. In that, we have spelled out about 10 different areas where we believe there has to be focus for economic revival. It is not just one thing. There are so many different things that need to be done. For example, if I may touch on just one or two things, we believe the first and foremost, is getting the entrepreneurial culture, the business culture back on track. Because if you look at Sri Lanka's number of entrepreneurs in the country, is about 2.6%, very, very low compared to any other country in the region, right? So why is that? That is because it is so difficult for somebody to start a business first. Secondly, the entrepreneurial culture is not taught in schools. The youth are not encouraged to go and start a business. They are always encouraged to go and work for somebody else. So just creating that culture is not going to happen haphazardly. It has to be done in a focused manner, and there has to be supporting startups, low income loans, and so many things have to be done. I'm just cutting short a lot of things that we mentioned. Second one is the digitalization. Right? In Sri Lanka, when you talk about corruption, I think Honorable Iran also mentioned, corruption is one of the biggest problems in this country. If you look at all these economic problems, corruption is top to bottom, not only politicians, all throughout there's corruption. So one best way to curb corruption,
even the bureaucrats,
everywhere, it's everywhere, right? Is digitalization, the government processes. So you minimize the opportunity for human interaction. The opportunity for corruption comes when there's human interaction. So digitalization is something that I think if we form a government, or if we are part of a government, something that has to be done very, very fast, and that has to be a priority for the country.
Dr. Godaheva, I think a month ago, TISL released this CPI, Corruption Perception Index, and Sri Lanka slipped 8 ranks down in terms of corruption. And I feel like the way people see it, corruption and politics go hand in hand. Well, are you all going to do something different to prove the people wrong? Not everybody, but some, or majority.
I joined the government sector after leaving the private sector, relatively young, as a service to the government. I joined the government sector at the age of 48 or something, right? Thereafter, after about 7 years, I came to politics as a politician. One thing I learned is that if you want to put this country back on track, corruption is the biggest issue. Corruption is the biggest issue. There's nothing else than corruption. Because if you look at the total, the money that we have spent and disappeared over the last 2 decades, a big chunk of that is due to corruption. It's very, very clear on that. So I'm totally agreeing with you.
Yeah.
That has to be a priority of the government. But the problem is when you say you are fighting corruption, that can't be for a political purpose. Now, for example, in 2015, when the Yahapalana government won the election, that was primarily on corruption. No? At that time, the issue was corruption. In 2019 it was security, 2015 it was corruption. But after they came to power, as Samir very correctly said, before 3 months passed, the infamous bond scam took place. And how many major corrupt deals took place during that time? But at the same time, they were going after opposition politicians. So the whole issue was, how to make use of this issue to gain a political advantage. That should not be the case. You must be genuinely focused on curbing corruption if you want to put this country back on track.
But the bond scam didn't only take place, the infamous bond scam took place in 2015, but there were repeated bond scams that took place several months after, even after the SJB was elected to power.
Even before?
No, under Minister, State Minister Iran Vikramaratne's watch as well. No, Iran.
Yeah, this is why I say that, all our discussions and debates are always finger pointing. And we are not focusing on systemic issues. The systemic issue, right, there on this is, it's been going on for 20 or 30 years. Central Bank, there was a forensic audit that was done, going back up to 2002 or something, right? And in that forensic audit, it shows that, the highlight was the 2015 bond scam. It shows that how the system is loose and that information is going out. Example, there is a meeting in the morning, interest rates are decided, and then that gets implemented half an hour later or whatever for the markets. But that information sometimes leaks out before that. And then traders use that information to actually make transactions. This has been going on. These practices have been going on. So later they tightened it, right, by basically using cameras, recordings, this, that, and the other. So like this, there have been systemic things. And those have nothing to do with politicians. Nothing to do with politicians. That is why I'm saying, coming from a banking background and seeing some of these happen, then why are we only focusing on politicians? There's a giver and a taker, right? Why are our laws only talking about the person who is taking it? Why not talk about the person who is giving the bribe as well? That is why I'm saying we have to tighten the system. We have to change the law that those who give are also corrupt. Those who take are also corrupt. So that is why I'm saying, rather than just pointing fingers at this one and that one, we have to basically, one is put the laws in place, one is put the practical mechanisms in place. Your issue on political will, I completely agree. There is a lack of it. There will continue to be a lack of it. Will continue. You know why? This system works for the corrupt. That's the day I opened my eyes, when I understood that it works for the corrupt. They don't want to change. So those of us who have come in saying that we want to change this, we have to keep going at it. We have to put the laws, we have to put the systems. When people actually see it work and a few people get sentenced and punished, then I think it will begin to change.
So is it slightly idealistic to think that, I mean, the way you explained it, the corruption runs very deep and it's deeply embedded. So would you say it's idealistic to think you could reform and change a deeply warped system like this?
I am idealistic, otherwise I won't be in politics.
Yesterday Iran, with a lot of pomp and pageantry, all unveiled the economic blueprint of the SJB. How is that important with the local government elections? What sort of changes can you all bring forth through an economic recovery blueprint at a time people are vying for an election? I think this question was posed by Mariam also earlier. Why are you all looking for an election when you all very well know that you all can't bring in the systemic change that you all are envisaging to achieve?
So when people go to the polls, right, there will be two things on their mind. The dominant thing in a local government election is they're going to look at their local ward and they're going to look at which parties are contesting, who are the representatives of that party, will they be able to solve our local problems. So that is, in a local government election, that will be a dominant factor. But apart from that dominant factor, people are also looking at national issues. They're going to, because the country is in such a huge crisis, they're going to say, which party can we trust? Which party, has the policies to deliver?
But
Which party has the team to deliver? You see? So while you are right, in a local government election, the higher weightage would normally go for issues in their local ward, and they will make the decisions, but then the other factor also does come in. So you have to basically tell the country, right, who you are, what do you stand for. You're right, you can't implement that after a local government election, but certainly after a local government election, down the road, right, there's going to be a general election, right, and then the country knows this is the party and these are what this party stands on. That goes for all parties.
But an election is not due anytime soon, a general election or a presidential election.
Yeah, there are elections that are due.
No, first of all, we are talking about the provincial council elections, which are due anyway.
Yeah.
So now we're talking about the local government elections, but a general election or a presidential election is not on the cards at the moment. This was very clearly articulated by President Wickremesinghe as well, who has the power to dissolve Parliament if he wishes to after
That's right.
March.
That's right. So elections are something like this in a democracy. President Wickremesinghe is legal, but he is not legitimate. Right. President Gotabaya Rajapaksa was legal, and he was legitimate at the beginning. He lost his legitimacy, he had to go. Parliament, it's a public view, not my view, because I'm a member of Parliament. We are legal, but the public think we are also not
Dr.
legitimate.
Gudeva, do you think that it's high time to dissolve Parliament? It's not about the local government elections, but dissolve Parliament and go for a fresh mandate from the people? Would that be a good option?
If you ask me for my choice,
Yeah.
I would prefer general election, because right now the problem is, as I mentioned at the very beginning, the Parliament has lost credibility by supporting a person who was rejected by 98% of the people of this country. I gave you the figures. 11.2 million people voted for parties other than the UMP. Ranil Wickremesinghe got only 49,000 votes. So which means he has got only 2.1%. So now when this Parliament brings him as the president, and also the person who was very much the creator of the problem, to solve the problem, it has lost its legitimacy. So that is why I think there has to be a general election. Then coming back to your question from Honorable Iran, it's true, Samir, the parliamentary elections are not due now. They are due in another 2 years' time. Presidential election, unless the president calls in 1 day in advance, that is also due in 2 years' time.
And we all know that he's not going to call for election.
However, why is there a provision in the constitution that the president can dissolve the parliament after 2.5 years? Is things can change if the ground situation changes, and if the situation demands.
But we know he's not going to do that.
There's a constitutional provision for that. So I think right now that situation has arisen.
And you think the president should call for a general election?
He has to, but he has no mandate. The government has no mandate. Look at the problems on the street. So many protests, right? So many strikes. And can a country go on like this?
So, Dr. Gudeva, I recollect you were one of the champions who brought Gotabaya Rajapaksa to play. One of the organizations, like the Vietmag organization, was founded by you, and you were a very staunch supporter, acting as a patron as far as this organization was concerned as well. Iran was talking about having a good team. If we look at the past, we all knew that the Vietmag had a good team of professionals, but they ruined the country at the end of the day.
Samir,
and when we speak about these teams, people are very skeptic. We don't want an SJB team. We don't want an NPP team. Iran, in fact, told right at the start, don't trust any leaders.
Samir, this is a frequent question and a false accusation. No, Vietmag had a
false
good team. No, let me explain. You said Vietmag had a team, right? That is correct. But did Vietmag run the country?
Cabinet at that
no,
time?
Exactly. So tell me one person who was in the cabinet from Vietmag. Tell me one person. Tell me a name.
There was a lot of state ministers.
There were state ministers.
I can name a few state ministers.
Yes, of course. I was also state minister, no, right? But who runs the country? State ministers or the cabinet ministers? Who is the executive? The president of the cabinet takes the decision.
But if you look at the cabinet at that time,
state minister can't even submit the cabinet paper. State minister can't even submit the cabinet paper.
But if you look at the state ministerial portfolios at that time and cabinet portfolios, state ministers were not directly reporting to cabinet ministers. It was not gazetted that way. it was, you all were able to independently act. Now, we all are journalists and we know what was going on at that time in the government. That is why I'm posing this question. Iran was initially asking us whether we are aware of what's happening. Of course we are. And that is why we are here on this side of the table, and that is why you are there on the other side of the table. So we know what happened at that time.
Samir, let me explain that, because general public is listening now.
Absolutely.
Yes, it was gazetted, right? But for a state minister to independently run his ministry, he should be able to submit his papers to the cabinet. But he couldn't do that. After the creating the state minister concept, President realized it's not going to work. At the end of the day, everybody has to go through the cabinet minister. And take my example, it was worst because I didn't even have a secretary. Here I'm the state minister for urban development. I don't have a secretary. I had to work with the secretary of the cabinet minister. So when he has little time, spare time, he will look at the requirements of the state minister.
Do you now regret?
What kind of power is that?
Now, do you regret now that you all supported Gotabaya Rajapaksa?
Very much.
You all regret?
Very much. Very much. I think we took a wrong decision because we thought he would fulfill the promises that was given to the people, and we trusted him not to be a non-Rajapaksa, right? Because 2015, the country
you were one of the people who polled the highest number of preferential votes from your district. Now, when you go back asking to vote for the Freedom People's Alliance from the Gampaha district, what do you tell them and what do people tell you?
Because I'm the only MP in the Gampaha district who stood by the people. I'm the only one who left the government. There are 13 MPs.
But there was one point, at one instance, you wanted to leave the government, but you didn't leave. Remember?
Yes, so that is also important for you to explain, no?
Yeah.
After
from May onwards.
After Honorable Gamini Jayasuriya resigned from the J.R. Javadana cabinet in 1987, opposing a decision by the president, to my knowledge, I'm the only minister who resigned on principle. When I was appointed the Minister of Mass Media, on the second day, I went and resigned. I said, I resigned, change this cabinet, right? Form a different system. Yeah, he didn't accept. He, in fact, President said, don't do it now because it'll be a slap on my face. Wait for 1 week. So I waited for 1 week, and that's it. But I resigned. Right? If I wanted all those powers, I would have stayed. But I left. In the Gampaha district, I can always tell the 325,000 people, I have not cheated you. I have stood by you. I'm the only one who left.
So,
Samir, I want to come back to something.
Rohana, are you going to come?
Yeah,
all right, okay, right.
You said that the government has made efforts to postpone the elections. You made the statement even in your opening statement as well. The government and the president, according to Mr. Godaheva, who was rejected by 98% of the country. You also touched on the Aragalaya. I believe that there is fear or doubt within the people, the public, that the government might even use violence to postpone these elections. I'd pose the question to all three gentlemen, but what is your take on this?
No, I don't think that the postponement of elections the government use for violence. But if they postpone the elections, violence can come arise. Because
so you don't think the government will use violence to postpone elections?
No, I mean they are anyway now. They have almost done, right? Now, until they release the money, the elections commissions are not able to hold the elections. And all these circulars, that is what I am telling, that all our history, the government has postponed the election. But using the legal, within the legal framework, with the power vested with them. But this is the first time that they are going to postpone without having any legal frame.
But Mr. Hettiarach, I'm confused now. This matter was, this matter was debated before the Supreme Court. And the Elections Commission gave an undertaking saying, we're taking steps to hold the election, there's no need for this. And then the Supreme Court held that there is no need for these petitions because parties, several political parties went to court and asked the Supreme Court for an order for the Elections Commission to hold the elections. The Supreme Court said, the Elections Commission is telling us that they are holding the election, so why should we issue an order? So dismiss the cases. So now what?
No,
what
that
next?
Is true. I mean, with this, the Elections Commissions are duty bound to hold the elections. So that is what they did, and that is what they do even now, right? But this is beyond their control now. I mean, they can summon the secretaries of finance, Ministry of Finance. They can summon this government printer. But if they are not following his guidance, so
But
then
Mr.
he has
Hettiarachchi-
to report back to the court, look, we promised this, but unfortunately, the government is not supporting.
Mr. Hettiarachchi, isn't there provision in the Constitution to file action against any state sector employee who does not or who impedes the holding of an election? And I think there is a penalty of about 3 years in prison. Why aren't those provisions being used?
There are, and I think Elections Commission is going to do that now.
Is going to do that?
They are going to do that. That is what I learned from them. But again, it will take time. So, I mean, they can make a complaints, but you know, in the judiciary system here, once you make a file case, it takes weeks and weeks, maybe months and months.
But I think a matter of such urgency will be heard quite quickly, just like this.
I will tell you one example. In the previous 2016 local council, when they postponed the elections due to the, it's not postponing actually as such, the delimitations, we went and asked the court to soon elections, right? That was our demand. The case went up 1 year and 3 months. So look at the system. So we also intervened one case in Pudukkottai and Muhudubadapattu, again asking the sooner elections. The local council period is 4 years. The case went up 5 years. So this is the situation where we are. That is why we also a little reluctant to go to the court, because it will end up the result that the government will take that advantage.
But you just said that right now at least 1,000 people have to go to courts and put in petitions.
Yeah, that's a different.
That's move.
No, yeah, that's
a. You are saying that you all don't have any confidence in the judiciary.
No, I'm not saying that we don't have confidence.
You just said that.
The system will take a lot of time frame. But if there is no other solutions, that is the only place where we has to address.
Rona,
so that is why.
Rona, I just want to ask you a question now. Yeah. You've been watching political parties play tug of war at elections. We've seen this happening right throughout. Now, Ranil Wickramaratne in his opening speech very clearly articulated, don't trust any leader. Who must the people trust?
I do agree with him. We need to trust the system. We need to make a system in place. But then again, system can be in place, but we need to people who can run the system properly. That's also a problem. I mean, there can be a proper
Who can run the people? Now, you have a parliament,
yeah.
From these parliamentarians, who do you think can run the system properly? Now, putting you somewhat on the limelight and giving you an opportunity to express your independent views. Now, you have the SLPP, you have 2 UN peers, and you have the SJB, you have the Dr. Nala Gudeva faction, you have the SLFP, Maitripala Sirisena faction. So you have certain factions. In your opinion,
do you think that it's a fair questions to observer?
Yeah. No, I'm saying,
no.
Who do you think these political parties can? Okay, let me rephrase it. Do you think the political parties who are right now in parliament can steer Sri Lanka to a better future?
No, you can phrase it in many different ways, but I'm not going to answer that question. But what I'm saying is, I mean, as Mr. Wickramaratne perfectly said, there's no perfect political party or the politicians. There's no perfect system, nowhere in the world. I mean, look at in the US elections, what happened in the past, and UK. I mean, it's always, you can compare with the other countries, you can compare with the regions. So it's a comparative assessment. And maybe you can assess with the international standards, right? So there are politicians who will make some difference. So people has to choose that. I mean, we should have a system to look at their politicians, and they need to evaluate. I think you can remember that is why we introduced this scorecard for voters to assess their candidate.
I remember this.
Voters to assess their the candidate without going their fathers or mothers or grandfathers. I mean, that's the politics we had in the past. But now I think this is the right time, because this election is coming after the Aragalaya. Most of the people were talking about the system change. This is the time where they can start with the system change. So people has to take right decisions at the right time.
Okay, Mr. Hettiar, just say we actually go forward with the election and it happens. We have international monitoring groups coming down to the country to observe the election and make sure that they are held, like ensure transparency when it comes to the election, right? Can you explain to the audience and us how they work? How do they operate?
To my knowledge, so far there is no international observers confirmed. I'm also part of the international body which we call Asian Network for Free and Fair Elections. I'm the General Secretary. We based in Thailand. We are planning to bring a couple of people. It's a kind of study for these elections. Because you know, the international observers, it is cost.
Yeah, but don't you think it's important, since you said this is the election post the Aragale, the people's struggle, where a lot of people came forward to voice concerns against what was happening in the country, and that attracted a lot of international attention towards the country, attention from the international community, right?
Yeah, I fully agree, because from the for the certain angles, I mean, to make the confidence of the people, make the confidence of whatever they come and do, but to make the confidence of the political party and the candidate. And also, whenever the international community is alert on the elections, the government may not misuse the government property. I mean, anyway they do, but there will be some limitations. And the political party, those who violating the law, there will be some sort of limitations. And in fact, you can make a report end of the day. So there are a lot of importance if international observers are here.
What would they typically do if they come, as a monitoring group?
I think they do the same thing like we do. But the difference, I mean, only difference is the people may have a different confidence with the international community. Because when they look at...
Because we don't trust our people?
No, they do trust. They do trust even the local people. But whenever the international people... But look, in these elections, now we are struggling to have elections now. As a local observer, civil society, we are demanding. But government is not serious enough so far. But when the international people come to the scene, look, for example, now IMF, if they seriously consider this matter, the election issue.
No, but that's part of the sovereignty of the. I don't think the IMF, Iran, with your experience, I don't think the IMF has a mandate to interfere in a democratic framework of a country. They can't do that. No.
Let me finish this. So what I'm trying to say is, when the international community involved with this, even if they try to demand, the government may serious about it. So sometime it's same like the international observers. I mean, there is no big difference with the international or local, because local people are the better people. They know the local contest.
In who we report whatever we observe to?
No, the international community also will do the same reporting to the local elections commission. And also they will prepare their own reporting. So end of the day, it may affect the government.
Iran, just want to pick your brain on this because of the Aragale. Do you think the Aragale, at least during the latter stages, was a clear representation of the public's opinion, majority of the public opinion? Was it a clear representation?
If you are talking about them being...
During the latter stages?
No, if you're talking about them being dissatisfied with the government and wanting a change, and then the young people coming forward, I think that they largely represented what people were thinking.
Yeah, so if you look at the Aragale itself, Iran, you know what happened and what transpired. And some political parties, you also part of that, and there was some assaults at that time. When you all visited that area when this question arose. So the sentiment at that time was that they don't want the 225 members in parliament. They want fresh blood, fresh thinking. Is this a representation when it comes to your council members who have been fielded? Has this been taken into account, at least the wishes of those who were engaged largely in the Aragale?
Yeah, so I think to some extent, I mean, always we can differ on the extent, For example, we made an internal policy decision, and the internal policy decision is legally we have to have 25% the women's quota. We made an internal policy decision that on our nomination list we should try to get 25% the youth quota. It's just an internal decision, it's not a legal decision. Then the other thing we did is, if people have contested previously and consecutively lost 2 elections, we said that we shouldn't be renominating them. And the reason for that is to open the space that new people can come in. Because look at it, if I'm a local organizer and people have been working very hard for the party, being very loyal to the party over a long period of time, they will come and tell you things like, we have done this, that and the other. Is this the way you treat us? You're not giving us nominations. So at the local level, it's very difficult to deal with that. But on the other hand, other thing is they were saying get new people into the system. So we made a policy decision, and the policy decision was if people had consecutively lost twice, then we don't give them nominations, so that it opens the space to bring new people. So we were sensitive to that fact and basically went down that road.
Right. So I want to pick the brains of Dr. Gudeheva, Rohana and Iran on what is the future for Sri Lanka, because now we are at a decisive time and we have to decide how we're going to steer the next few months, which are very, very crucial for Sri Lanka. What is the stand of the Freedom People's Alliance as far as the way forward is concerned on Sri Lanka? What are the plans you all have in place? So I'll give you 3 minutes, Dr. Gudeheva, to sum up.
See, all of us agree that we are in a really bad economic situation as at now. Not only economic, politically also, because as I mentioned earlier, we have a president and a government who do not have the people's real mandate. So I think the starting point is bringing political stability to this situation by having a general election, probably followed by a presidential election as early as possible, and bring some kind of political stability. In that, I think it is time that we look at all political parties, particularly in the opposition, and see how we can bring together the best team together, because we have a huge dearth of good people in this country. That's a fact. That is a common problem everywhere, even in the political parties. I can't see a single political party who can say, okay, I have a full team which can run this country effectively, because people are scattered. So that is why Freedom People's Congress, when we formed, we tried to bring all political parties together in the opposition for every discussion. So answer to your question, I think what we would look at is see how we can bring the best team together.
You all convinced the SJB to join hands with your party?
Not
because at the presidential election vote last year, you all were able to do that. But this time around, not enough convincing power or diplomacy took place?
No, this is in this local government election. Obviously, SJB would want to contest alone because they have a large base and there are a lot of people who want to get nominations. So probably this is not the time that you should invite them to come together. But at a future time, when you talk about general elections, I think we will be open to discuss with anybody and see whether we can come to an agreement on the overall economic framework, which is a must, and then a good team.
Would you all consider a common candidate in the future, or because we saw that SLPP leader Maithripala Sirisena has already told that he wants to contest the next presidential elections. So would he be on the cards for your party as well?
If the next presidential election comes, let's say in 1 year's time, there's a constitutional hitch. It's not possible, but let's assume somehow it comes.
Hypothetically.
Hypothetically, if it comes, I think our main enemy would be the current president.
Main enemy?
Our main enemy, political enemy. Political enemy would be the current president, who's suppressing democracy, who's ruining the economy, continuing everything that he has done in the past. So defeat him, probably we will have to look for a common candidate, probably. I don't know. I don't know what will be the situation, but there's a strong possibility that we should look at a common candidate, because it has to be a two-man race. A three-man race will give an undue advantage to somebody who probably does not have the people's full mandate.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nala Gudeheva. I want to now pick Iran's brain on this way forward.
Yeah, so Certainly on the economy, the economic crisis, the agreement with the IMF needs to be concluded. Now, when the IMF agreement is concluded, pre-conclusion there are issues, and those are the discussions that are going on presently. Then the conclusion of the agreement, then you will have to do the reforms. Now, when you are going to do the reforms, basically whoever is going to do that will have to have a mandate from the people. And I don't think this parliament or this government has the mandate to actually carry out the reforms. So therefore, you will have to have basically an election. There's no question about doing away with the democratic process, and you will have to have that. When you go down that road, some of the first things that we should do is, right, as we discussed today, the anti-corruption laws, the anti-corruption processes and things need to be put in. For the first time, the IMF has also made that an issue and actually mentioned that to government. They have brought it up at the early stage. The other things that we should look at it is judicial processes, to speeding up judicial processes. People in the country must have confidence in our system. Judicial system is one. I was in a temple the other day, and the monk told me he had been to the temple for the first time, and he couldn't basically, he was wondering what was happening. He went to the courts for the first time, and he said the judge called, there were 30 cases, 27 were postponed, only 3 were heard. This is the first time he had been there. And he said to me, he was wondering why they had actually put 30 cases to be heard in one morning. He says, if they had told us, you can't hear this because we all know, come in 10 years from now, he would have said 10 years from now we could have come to court, and in one hearing he could have taken the case and the case was over. Otherwise, he said every time it's postponed, we had to pay 50,000 rupees to the lawyer. This is a monk actually telling me this story. So this is a story of judicial processes. People's confidence needs to be built. That reform needs to be taken place. Then economically, I would say state-owned enterprises, right, huge losses, right? And our philosophy on that is basically let the private sector, let investors, let foreign investors come in where they can actually run economically and give a return to government. Government, we want people to make money. We're going to tax them so that we can protect the vulnerable through basically public sector programs, and then also spend on education and on health. That's going to be a priority. In addition to that, there are 2 other things which we want to really do to really change the system and revolutionize the place. One is overseas Sri Lankans. There are millions of Sri Lankans overseas. Sri Lanka has one of the largest, what we call diaspora or expatriate populations in the world, right? We want those people back here to support this country. They have been looked at as a liability. We think that they are one of the greatest assets this country has. Their education levels, their experience, right? Their networks, their dollars, their investments. They need to feel that this country welcomes them. I know of a doctor working in a private hospital, and today I was told on the phone that for the 32nd year, this foreign doctor lady is going to the immigration department. She said she dreads the experience of going to the immigration department to get her visa stamped for a year. Married to a Sri Lankan doctor, lived here for 40 years and still going through this hardship. We need to relook this whole thing. Overseas Sri Lankans must feel welcome here. And finally, I would say this, the other big revolutionary thing we need to do. We are in this mess because we messed up our education system. We came up with, particularly the left parties, they came up with this slogan saying free education, and they interpreted it as only government is as the only supply of education. What happened in my generation? Very few of us went to university. Very few got a professional education. Very few got a vocational education, technical education. We sent our mothers, our sisters to countries like the Middle East to work for $200, $300, which they remitted back here. If they had a basic education, they could have gone as a health worker, as a nurse, not $300, $3,000 a month. This is the mess we made with our generation. We won't leave this to the next generation. Every Sri Lankan child, every student must be given higher education, either university education, vocational education, or professional education. And we have the plans of how we are actually going to do that. So the supply of education is not only government, non-government, non-profit sector. Top universities in the world are non-government, not profit distributing. We need to bring laws to basically permit that and let the private sector come into it. State's role in education is regulation or standards. So we have these plans which we will certainly want to roll out And somebody made the valuable point. Some things within 6 months, some things will take us 2 years, some things will take us 5 years to roll it out.
Right. Rohan?
Well, I mean, from civil society angles or even the citizens' angle, no matter whoever running the country for us, right? But we need to have a visionary leader, but who value the human values, who is willing to bring the justice or rule and order, and also the governance system. And also, we need a leader who can make the confidence of the people now, because we lose our trust with the government. We lose trust with all the system, as Mr. Wickramaratne said. So we need a person who lead the country, who can bring the trust among the public. That's most important at this point. And also I go with Dr. Godeheva also. Now at this critical moment, we need to work as a team. We may have a different political ideology, different political views, but if politicians are really if they really want to serve the country, they have to work together, at least for a certain period. I can remember in some time back in Indonesia, they had a similar situations, but people has given their jewelry and other asset to the government because there was a trust and there was a system in
South Korea.
No, in Indonesia also.
Okay, right.
Indonesia also. So we need to have a team to run the country, but with the visionary leadership. We are lacking with the leadership. I don't know, we're giving full respect for the both honorable parliamentarians. I mean, they do. I mean, we respect him. He's the only one who, not only one actually, out of a couple of parliamentarians who submit his assets in publicly.
Yes.
I mean, we need to respect those who are doing good. But in generally, we are lacking the leadership, visionary leadership. So that is what we need at the moment.
Right. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us this evening on Face the Nation. I know Dr. Godeheva and Iran are busy campaigning for their respective political parties at grassroots level. Will elections be held, Rona?
With all that, I can remember some of these TV discussions. We are repeatedly saying that elections will take place. But then after having tea, when we are having tea after the discussions, the same question was asked. So now I think the situation it's unlike as we plan on 9th March.
It's unlikely.
Unlikely. If we get the money within the next 2-3 days time frame, yes, but otherwise it's unlikely.
Will it ever be held?
It's up to the president's decisions, no? The government decisions.
Right. Thank you very much, Dr. Nala Godeheva, Member of Parliament, Freedom People's Alliance. Dr. Godeheva has been very straightforward, has come on Face the Nation a couple of times to express the views of the ruling party when you were part of the SLPP, when you were campaigning, and today criticizing your own colleagues in Parliament with regard to democracy and so on and so forth. Thank you very much, Dr. Godeheva. We respect you, and thank you very much for coming on the show despite your demanding schedule. Thank you very much. Rohan Hettiarachchi, Executive Director of PAFREL. Thank you very much, Rohan. It was after a very long time that we had you on the show, and we of course enjoyed your views, and we will take into heart what you said at your last statement. Mr. Iran Wickramaratne, Member of Parliament from the Samui Janabala area. It's very difficult to catch you, Iran. I must tell you, you know, after being in the opposition, it's not that easy anymore to get you on a show. Why is that? And that grin on the face is not the answer. You all are accountable to the public who elected you all, and you are from the national list, but I'm presuming that you will be contesting the next election, so you need to be more visible on TV shows. So thank you very much, Iran, for always joining us on the show and being very, very straightforward with your thoughts. Thank you very much, Shania Dadigama. Thank you very much, Attorney at Law Shanal Benedict. I'm not going to miss out saying your name at the end, Mariam Gunavajaya. Thank you very much for joining us this evening on Face the Nation. Iran, very quickly, if Diana Gamage is revoked from her parliament seat, who have you all thought of giving it? Ranjan Ramanayaka?
I won't really say that a decision has been made. So certainly at that point in time,
Someone who won't cross over.
no, somebody whose skills will be needed
Right.
at that particular point in time.
Thank you very much.
Just for your
a round of
information,
applause, yes.
we also file RTI applications. Now it's in the third level, the RTI
Right.
Commission. We are asking who is this dual citizens parliamentarian.
Absolutely.
Hopefully we will get within the next
Absolutely.
couple of days' time.
I think keep up doing the good work that you all do as PAFRL, and we'll wait and see how the cookie crumbles as far as Sri Lanka is concerned in the next couple of months. I'll leave you tonight with a quote, as I always do. People shouldn't be afraid of their government. Governments should be afraid of their people. Take care.